Hello, Peppers. This is Pep with Chaz and
Dr. Dave.
Dr. Dave's back. Tell us who you are, Dr. Dave, for the
I am
people who haven't seen
Dr.
it.
David Smith. I hold not a real doctor, but I do hold a PhD in political science.
I would trust you
not
with
a
my-
real science, but it is a real PhD.
I would trust you with my life, Dr. Dave.
Thank you.
You can operate on me anytime.
And before we get started, I just want to say thank you and excellent job to Wednesday's guest, Indrani. This
Thank
is
you very
a
much.
really fantastic podcast.
I'm thanking you on her behalf.
Yes. Well, it was a great idea to get her in. So thank you very much, Indrani. You were excellent, and that was a great couple of hours.
Thank you, Indrani. He speaks the truth.
Yes, because that's the first time I've ever listened to one of our podcasts all the way through.
They are unlistenable, I find. I agree. Let's get on to today's news. COVID. Let's start with COVID because we didn't talk about this much on the Friday show. If you're interested in what we did talk about in the Friday show, you can see it on iView or on Facebook, our Facebook page, ABC Planet America, where you can comment. People are asking, how do I comment about this? You can comment on the video that this is where you will find this on that Facebook page or on YouTube where we have it in HD as well.
Yes, join our Facebook commenters.
Yes.
It's a great community.
They're a great team. They especially when they say nice things about us and
Yes.
use emoticons.
Yes.
Let's talk COVID.
There is the occasional crazy conspiracy theory that gets posted.
But
up
that's
there.
part of the fun.
Usually just in the form of a YouTube link, but you don't have to click on those links.
Look, and those people, they're going to be running for Congress in a couple of weeks
They
anyway.
are.
We're coming to that.
The QAnon caucus.
We are coming to that. Let's start with COVID, though. Now, obviously, the news at the moment is this new spike, which is going crazy. The cases, we're up to 57,000 new cases today. It's going up by 3,000 or 4,000 every day at the moment.
Yeah.
And like I said on the show today, we should just, I think, wait a little bit to see how bad this is because for the last now almost 3 weeks, I reckon, we've been saying, cases are going up. The deaths are going to follow, and the deaths haven't followed. And not just the deaths haven't followed, the hospitalizations haven't followed.
No, hospitalizations are following now.
They go up a little bit. They're going a bit, but there's still heaps of room. Like Texas is one of the worst states, for instance.
Yes, yeah.
And they're not even at 50% capacity of their hospital beds. So look, they're going up, but there's still room to go. This is not like March yet. Yes. But I want to just introduce the thought with, I think it's at this time, while we're watching the cases going crazy, I think it's worth remembering the 2007 CDC pandemic guide, which was written by the Bush administration at the time. Remember, they let's give them credit. They had their foresight on this. They wrote a pandemic guide, not in response to a pandemic.
No.
They just thought this is something you should do. Not even Obama's team did that.
They thought when this happens, we need to use this as an opportunity to expand the national security state.
I think you've turned the positive to a negative there, Dr. Dave, but that's okay. I want to read you just a little quote from the 2007 pandemic guide, CDC. Social distancing would, in all likelihood, be implemented in most communities at some point during the pandemic. The potential exists for such interventions to be implemented in an uncoordinated, untimely, and inconsistent manner that would impose economic and social costs similar to those imposed by strategically implemented interventions, but with dramatically reduced effectiveness. Isn't that interesting?
That is
A
interesting.
little bit of a time machine there.
Yes.
From 2007. But look, things are getting on the improve, hopefully, in that Trump now at least recognises that masks work. At least he says he does for this week.
He is, yes. This is becoming an increasingly sort of messy area. And I mean, first of all, just before we get to masks, he is still going on about how the rate is only rising because of increased testing, which is absolute garbage because the test positivity rate has gone up from 4% to 8% in the last 3 weeks.
In Arizona, it's 24%. In Florida, it's
Absolutely.
16%. In Texas, it's 14%.
All of which points to there's not enough testing being done rather than too much. And of course, he's saying, and the mortality rate is the lowest in the world, which it is
crap.
definitely not. But okay. So masks, now it didn't help with the whole masking controversy, of course, that it started out with public health officials giving very confusing messages about this a few months ago.
I would say inaccurate
Yeah, Surgeon General even suggesting people shouldn't buy masks because they needed to be kept for health workers, whereas basically over the last few months, with so many cats out of so many bags, essentially masking is one of the last constructive things that they can actually do. And masks will make a difference at this point. It is common sense. It's increasingly backed by scientific research.
So does this mean we're going to see Trump in the mask?
No.
No.
Okay, so there's a few things going on here. So as you and Indrani were talking about, increasingly Trump's allies are putting pressure on him to take a pro-mask stance.
Yeah.
So not just people like Mike Pence, Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity saying, I went to the grocery store. Everyone's wearing masks.
Hannity is literally the guy sitting next to Trump in the bunker.
Yes.
And even he is saying, let's get the masks going.
Okay, so eventually the point that Trump has arrived at is a couple of days ago, he said, oh yeah, I'm pro-masks in situations where social distancing isn't possible. And then he said, oh yes, I wear a mask. I think I look quite good in a mask. It makes me look like the Lone Ranger. Which is interesting. Now, okay, so for those of you under the age of 70, the Lone Ranger wore this mask over his eyes with the eye holes cut out.
Okay, so Trump's doing it wrong.
Well, if he is wearing the mask like that, you know, because classically in a Western, someone who wears a mask over their nose and mouth is up to no good.
Yeah.
So, so that was a bit of a confusing statement, but but this is as far as Trump's going to go. He's going to say, oh yeah, I wear a mask when nobody's can see me and I look good in it. He is not going to wear a mask. And there's a very, he is not going to, well, okay, I could be proven wrong on this tomorrow. Like he might appear.
Make a call. That's fine.
Might appear in a mask tomorrow, but
as the Lone Ranger.
As the Lone
Not even protecting his own eyes.
But this is why I think it is unlikely. Okay, and this is going to require a bit of an in-depth explanation. Trump is a classically charismatic leader.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, by charismatic, I don't just mean, magnetic. I mean it in the sense, the really old sense of the word, which comes from charism, a Greek word meaning gift. In early Christianity, it was used to refer to gifts from God. We've talked before on the show about Pentecostal Christians and the broader category of charismatic Christians, who are people who emphasize the Holy Spirit, where they see things like speaking in tongues, things like faith healing, things like prophecy. They see these as gifts from God given to people, acting through people through the Holy Spirit. And we've talked about this particular block of American Christians, which might be about 25% of the whole population, sees Trump in this way. They see him as a vessel of God. They see him as somebody who has been endowed with all of these gifts, with all of these unique powers. Trump is very aware of this. And also, though, even before a large part of his audience and his constituency came to be these charismatic Christians, Trump in his business career was the same, right? He was, I've had extraordinary success, and I have extraordinary success because I'm me, essentially. I am just naturally very good at this. And his whole business model was always basically developing this bond of trust, a very misplaced bond of trust in most cases, but it was a bond of trust with his customers. He's always been making himself a kind of cult figure. There's an article in, I think it was New York Magazine in 2011 about when Trump was launching a multi-level marketing scheme. The title of the article was, "If I Can't Trust Donald Trump, Who Can I Trust?" Is
that going on the reading list?
That can go on the reading list, yes. And it was about this kind of charismatic leadership, charismatic authority that Trump has. So Max Weber, who is one of the founding figures of sociology, theorized that this was one of the types of authority in the modern world, though it's a type of authority that goes back to very pre-modern origins. And religious leaders are your classically charismatic leaders. Their whole authority comes from, especially prophets, founders of religions. Right, their authority doesn't come from an established church. It doesn't come from an established legal framework. It certainly doesn't come from any kind of bureaucracy. It comes from, I have been blessed by God and I have been spoken to by God. That is exactly the same kind of charisma that Trump has. I alone can fix it.
Yes,
it's always about him. The authority is not from the fact that he commands literally the biggest organization on earth. The authority is about him and his unique gifts. And the idea is that it couldn't be done by anybody else.
I wonder, so just to jump in there for a second, I wonder if this could be also related, because when you were talking about this, I was thinking to myself, why not George W. Bush in 2004? I mean, he was the guy who sat through 9/11.
Yes.
Why not? And I suddenly thought to myself, I wonder if this is related as well to the amount of cynicism and disillusion that people have at the moment that actually makes them more conducive to hero worshipping someone because they don't believe in anyone else.
Yes, yeah. I think that you can see, the story of basically the entire post-Cold War America as just institutional failure after institutional failure. Very, very deep disillusionment from basically all of the institutions of government, public institutions in general, increasing kind of distrust of expertise, some of which is, actively promoted by the media. Yes, Trump was very well suited to the times. And but as a charismatic leader in this way, this is why, in his view, he cannot ever be seen as weak in any way. And I think he believes that actually any change to his image at all is a sign of weakness. Any sign of compromise with this bureaucratic world, with the world of conventional government, of conventional politics, he views that as death. And that's also so first of all, I think that's the reason why we're not going to see him wearing a mask, right? Once he wears a mask, he enters the symbolic world of the authority of experts and bureaucrats and scientists, all these people that he said he would throw out of Washington.
Yeah.
Right. So he can say, oh, yeah, I'm pro-mask, blah, blah, blah. But he is not going to actually put that cloth on himself. Right. He is the divine charismatic figure. If he does that, he loses his charismatic power. But this gets to something that we were saying earlier. This is why you often hear this conversation on the left or in liberal circles. Wouldn't it be frightening if there was a version of Trump who was competent?
Yes.
On the one hand, yes, I can see how that is frightening. On the other hand, a competent version of Trump is not Trump. Anyone who is good at government doesn't have Trump's charisma. This is why I think that the Tom Cottons of the world and even the Tucker Carlsons of the world, who have constructed authority in very different realms. Okay, so Cotton by mastery of the American political system, Carlson by dint of the American media system.
And I do think he'll be running for president one day.
Oh yeah, I think he probably will. So Tucker Carlson and Tom Cotton are two of the ones who are talked about, a lot. But the thing is, any kind of competence that comes from another realm of authority, that means you're not Trump.
Yeah.
Right? Trump's authority comes from Trump qua Trump. Trump the blessed man, Trump the unique talent, Trump the master of the art of the deal, Trump who, despite being so ensconced in so many different elite worlds for so long, is still somehow an outsider in all of them. People who are as professionally accomplished as Tom Cotton or Tucker Carlson, who have expertise that is, recognized by conventional standards, who have competence that is recognized by conventional standards, bang, that's your charismatic authority gone. Right? That is instead authority that comes from mastery of an existing political or commercial system.
So are you of the opinion that if Trump loses, it's over? It's the end of this era?
Yeah, as it looks now, yes.
Okay.
Right? Because I think in some ways, perhaps the only person who can actually do a credible Trump impression is Donald Trump Jr.
He'll be there.
He'll be there. He, at the same time, though, I mean, this is one of the things that I've thought has weakened Trump over the years a bit is, perhaps without realizing, he actually has made compromises, especially around language. A few years ago, he never used terms as abstract as the left. Barely even used terms like liberal and conservative. He liked talking about Republican and Democrat, right? Very solid categories, teams fighting against each other. He didn't go in for the kinds of abstract categories. Now, more and more, I think actually increasingly under the influence of his son, right, who is far more in sort of conventional right-wing world.
Or maybe Kushner.
Yeah, and goes into all that, it's the far left. Right. Trump says that. When he says that, he gets weaker because he just sounds like, another one of these right-wing figures that people have been listening to for years. Back in 2016, he actually sounded kind of genuinely different.
He did.
Yeah. And this brings me to a final point, because I've been talking about Trump, but let's have a look at the effect that all of this has on his supporters. I think that for a long time now, I think at least since the start of the Obama era, we've seen this real, what I would call, ethnicization of conservative identity. Conservatism is turning into a physical, protected, almost heritable kind of identity. And Trump has really accelerated that process because he becomes the physical persona. He becomes the physical embodiment, the physical symbol of it, replacing all abstract principles, right? The fact that Trump isn't across the abstract principles of conservatism, that doesn't matter because most people aren't abstract thinkers anyway. He is actually something a lot more concrete. So the anti-mask movement that we've seen up until this point, and we'll see if it begins to dissolve now that Trump's at least... So, that was a perfect example of that. That's the purest example of identity politics that you can possibly imagine, right? It's this purely expressive politics. This is my political identity. I am a conservative. I am a Trump supporter. Therefore, I don't wear a mask, because ultimately what this is all about is politics. This is all about friend and enemy. And I take my cues from, what is basically the physical embodiment of this identity, which is Trump. So Trump has really accelerated this process of conservative identity politics to the extent that, it's become this very, very kind of solid physical thing. Now, American politics was going that way anyway in terms of the in terms of the kinds of polarization of the population, but it's become very visible. And what it's akin to is the way that certain religions over time have become racialized. Okay, so Judaism goes from being considered a religion to being considered not just a religion, but also a race or an ethnicity. That's a process that begins sometime in the Middle Ages. And I mean, that was really to do with the way that Jews were persecuted in Christendom. At some point, Christian authorities decided, rather than try to convert these people, because that's not going to happen, it would be a lot easier just to kill them, right? A lot easier just to expel them from the polity. Islam has become and is in the process of being racialized in all kinds of ways, where, most people know very little about beliefs in Islam, but what they recognize is physical markers of Islam. And once again, that's to do with the way that Muslims are often persecuted and victimized. It revolves around sort of physical markers. Now, this is an interesting sort of process of, I won't call it racialization because it already has a sort of racial component to it, which is whiteness. It's a sort of ethnicization of conservatism as conservatives starting to make the kinds of claims that ethnic groups make.
Well, they're being persecuted as well on Twitter.
For them, exactly, yes. Yeah, and
we'll come back to that.
Yeah. And also, given the overlap with charismatic Christianity, where the sense of I am being persecuted is very important to people's, identity. But it's an ethnicization that this group has done to themselves rather than having it done to them.
I want to pick up on your image of Trump as I alone.
Yes.
You were just describing before. And when you were saying that, you might have seen I was just tapping away on my laptop. It reminded me of a clip that I saw from Joe Biden. We actually mentioned this.
Yes.
Mentioned this on Wednesday, but I didn't play it. And I'm going to play it now because it strikes me as whoever wrote this, it strikes me as a clever bit of ninjutsu where you use the person's strength against them and turn it into a weakness.
Right.
Which is like, if that is right, and I think you are right, that is part of Trump's selling point. It's he alone. He is the one. It's all about Trump. Trump is it. Joe Biden turned in his speech about COVID, he turned that into a negative.
He's like a child who can't believe this has happened to him. All his whining and self-pity. Well, this pandemic didn't happen to him. It happened to all of us. And his job isn't to whine about it. His job is to do something about it, to lead. If I have the honor of being president, I promise you I will lead. I will do everything I can to take responsibility and ease this burden on you and your families. I'll put your family first.
Yeah.
So his critique is, for Trump, it's all about him.
Yes.
I'm going to make it about you.
Yes.
You will come first, not me. And I think that's a very clever way to turn I alone into a massive negative in an election campaign.
I think you're right.
So that's, I'll give him points. See, that's whoever wrote that, very clever.
Yes.
And we'll see if they keep on following up with that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why we're probably not going to see Trump wearing a mask. It's also why all the talk of who's the next Trump going to be, there really isn't going to be anyone like Trump. As I said, Donald Trump Jr. can do a credible Trump impression, but Donald Trump Jr., that would be a different kind of authority. That would be what Max Weber called traditional authority, which comes from being the son of the great one, essentially, because Donald Trump Jr. doesn't have his father's charisma in the same sense.
I actually think this is not related to what you're saying, but what the other problem Donald Trump Jr. has is that Donald Trump Sr. has an authenticity to him, as far as I'm concerned, of being one of the Republicans.
Yes. Yeah.
Even though he wasn't actually a Republican. His personality, what he likes, the TV he likes to watch, everything about him is exactly like his voters. Donald Trump Jr. is not like that.
No.
Everything that Donald Trump Jr. is about the dudes on Twitter.
Yes.
The conservative dudes on Twitter. He is a real life Twitter troll, Donald Trump Jr. Whereas Donald Trump Sr. is not like that.
No.
So until Twitter becomes the entire world, which it won't by 2024, I don't think, Donald Trump Jr.
Let's hope not.
Donald Trump Jr. is not going to get enough votes.
Yeah.
That's going to be a small sector of the Republican Party. So anyway, that's my prediction.
I think that you're right.
Yeah. But we're making predictions about the future. I thought this week we saw another insight into the future, actually, which was when the Trump administration bought 90% of the world's supply of remdesivir. Now, we've all been talking, how about you? I've been talking to a lot of people about when this vaccine's going to come and about whether it's going to affect the footy season next year and all the rest of it. It's something occurred to me, we're not going to see that vaccine for a very long time because America is going to buy it all.
Yeah.
They're just going, there's 90% of the world's supply of remdesivir. That is an insight into the future. Vaccine after vaccine after vaccine.
Really cheerful. Well, I mean, it depends. I suppose it does depend on who develops it. I mean, if the EU develops it, they're not just going to sell the entire stockpile to the
assuming
US.
America develops it or America gets a patent of it, then we're not going to be seeing it for 12 months after America sees it. It's just going to take so long for them to, because there's a lot of Americans who are going to want this vaccine before they start selling it elsewhere.
Can't blame them.
Yeah. Anyway, I just want to go through a couple of policies quickly, COVID related, because there's a few policies flying around. I haven't had a chance to talk about this for a while. First of all, I'm talking about Elizabeth Warren's policy, which is the Protecting Renters from Evictions and Fees Act.
Yes.
And the idea of this is that current protections for renters expires like soon, like July 25 from memory.
Yeah.
And they don't cover most renters anyway. They only cover federally backed mortgages,
Yep.
which is like, I think I've got down here, 12.3 million of 43.8 million rental units. So it's about a quarter, right? So most places don't have rental protection already. And they're the ones who get sacked as well.
Yeah.
So they need it. Anyway, her policy, her act would apply to almost all renters. I'm not sure exactly who it doesn't, but I think it's pretty much all renters. And it would extend eviction protections for a year. I was looking around to March 2021. I was looking around for what happens to the landlords, because let's not forget them. Maybe it's because my dad's a real estate agent, but I just think, I mean, some people are like, they're like Kushner, but then, but some people, if they're landlords, they still need money. And if they get stiffed, then that's going to create economic problems elsewhere in the economy as well, apart from being unfair. I can't find what happens to the landlords. I'm assuming that there's some kind of government subsidy for the landlords who aren't.
I would assume so.
Because that would be
there has never, ever been a policy. No, there's never, ever been one of these policies devised in history that didn't actually look after the landlords first.
Yeah. So I'm sure they'll be looked after. But anyway, I think that
it's the Democratic Party that we're talking about here, not,
Sure.
It's not Vladimir Lenin.
No. So anyway, I reckon that's not getting a lot of attention, that act, but I think it should, because July 25 is very soon. And if people start getting evicted, and because they've got a backlog, they don't get out of the rent that they didn't have to pay until July 25.
No.
It's owed on July 25.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a bunch of people getting evicted on July 25 if that doesn't happen. And that is when your recession really kicks in, because at the moment the recession's been covered up a little bit because of all the stimulus. But as soon as that starts running out, unemployment runs out at the end of July, the rental protection ends at the end of July. Then you start getting demand shocks and supply shocks, and then you've got a real problem. So anyway, I just flagged that as something I think is.
And also, I mean, job numbers at the end of this month could be a lot worse than they are.
Yeah, well, the unemployment figures that we just saw today cover up to the second week of June, which is before the COVID spike.
Yes, yes. And they reflect that very optimistic wave of reopening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Another policy, I don't think you're going to like this one much, but I'll throw it out there just because I've been banging on about it. The $600 extra stuff for the bonus for unemployed, which I keep on going on about. This is the Democratic Party that you just referred to. Schumer and Wyden have a bill to deal with that, because part of the problem is that people come up with all these fantastical ways of going, okay, well, if you earn this much, then you get this kind of rebate, so it's not too much, etc. The problem is their computer systems are also outdated, that they can't process it. The state computer systems aren't good enough to process complicated algorithms.
Absolutely,
and how much of a wake-up call is that?
Because these are also the ones, these are the same computers that are responsible for Medicaid. For unemployment benefits in normal times.
It's a bit of a sign that your public system is underinvested when their computer systems aren't as good as a solar-powered calculator from 1984.
No, absolutely.
That's what they are. Anyway, but the Schumer and Wyden bill, they come up with a simple way to try and deal with this issue of 2/3 of people on unemployment benefits are getting paid more than they got when they were working.
Yep.
And their solution is this. It's based on the unemployment rate in the state.
Right.
So if the unemployment rate in the state is over 11%, they get $600 bonus. If it's between 10 and 11%, they get a $500 bonus, and so on, going down by $100 until you get to 6% unemployment, and then there's no bonus. What do you reckon about that?
Shit.
thought you'd say
Stupid.
that.
Classic Democratic Party.
Do you want to go into slightly more detail, or just
look, I mean, everyone has heard my views on this kind of means testing before, where the whole, where the overriding concern is, oh God, what if we give someone too much money? Wouldn't that be the worst possible outcome.
I think the concern in this case is not, those poor people they're gonna get away with a couple of $100. I don't think that's the problem. I think the concern is if someone is literally earning $500 a week more than they would earn if they were working, then they're not going to work. And
Which
that's quite
would be
reasonable.
good from a public health point of view at this point, as
it would right now.
Yes, yeah,
it would
yeah.
right now, but in 9 months' time, or whatever, because I should say the Schumer Wyden bill is forever. This is until they get to 6%.
Nothing is forever, Chaz.
Sure, but it has no run out, so it's supposed to last through 2021 or whatever until they get to 6% unemployment, essentially.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously, if COVID is around and you get sick when you work, you don't want to make people work.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about if you get into an Australian type situation where it's pretty much over, close to it. Sorry, Victoria. But you don't. What they're trying to avoid is a situation where people have not just no incentive, but active disincentive to get back to
Yeah,
work.
I still think that's a relatively minor problem in the big picture here.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I will now tell you the worst policy ever. We will both agree on this one. This is called the American Tax Rebate and Incentive Program Act, or the
God.
American TRIP Act. It's from Martha McSally, who's Martha McSally. She's from Arizona. She's about to lose and the Senate race, and
Yes.
she's desperately trying to come up with anything to get some attention. She's also takes lots of donations from the tourism industry in Arizona. And so they had this idea, which
Yeah.
she's now passed on, which is a $4,000 tourism tax credit through to 2022.
Oh, I saw this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where it pays for lodging, travel, entertainment costs for as long as you take a domestic holiday, a holiday in America, anywhere in America, it'll pay for it. But that in itself, I think there's probably better things you can spend money on. But leaving that aside, firstly, it's not non-refundable. What that means is, if you don't pay $4,000 worth of tax, you do not get $4,000 worth of tax rebate. So essentially, the only people who can claim this are people who already pay more than $4,000 worth of tax, which, for those who don't know how the tax system works in America, is pretty rich people, because the federal income tax system really only kicks in above median income, essentially. So you're talking about people who are basically in the top 40% when you're talking about people who pay $4,000 worth of tax.
Yep.
So that's not many people. And they're the people who least need a tax rebate and who are most likely going on a holiday anyway without a tax rebate.
Yes.
That's number one. Number two, it also, you don't only get it in your tax, as in you don't get it at the time.
Yes.
So you need to have $4,000 lying around in your bank account to pay for the holiday, and then you get the tax rebate 6 months' time.
By the
or a
way,
year's
this is
time.
very, very classically American, where benefits are delivered through taxes.
Yes.
The American welfare state is a lot bigger than people think it is. In
It's
fact, it's a lot
huge.
bigger than most Americans think it is. Suzanne Mettler has this fantastic book called The Submerged State about just how many welfare benefits are delivered to middle-class Americans through taxes. And because of the fact that they're delivered through taxes, people don't see themselves as recipients of welfare. So there's all this fantastic survey data about, do you get the earned income tax credit? Do you get mortgage deductions? Blah, blah. Do you get, various education grants? Blah, blah. Okay, so do you receive welfare? Oh, God, no.
Yeah.
And what any system that delivers things through tax in this way, rather than through direct payment, which is how even middle-class welfare is delivered in somewhere like Australia. And we've got quite a lot of middle-class welfare because Howard and Costello were the kings of it, and no one's really wanted to wind it back since then. It really means that there is not a lot of broad-based support for the concept of the welfare state, because no one sees themselves as a recipient. Welfare is stigmatized as something that is that's just unemployment benefits.
That's going onto the reading list, by the way.
Yeah,
Yes.
Suzanne Mettler, The Submerged State. It's a fantastic book.
And I'll just make one more point about this stupidest policy ever, and
Yes.
that is that a tourism credit in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, there
will
does
spread
seem to be
it
something that's not very
everywhere.
well thought out here.
Especially for Arizona. It's based in Arizona of all places.
Yeah.
It's really not well thought through. So that is the dumbest policy. And Martha McSally, good riddance in 4 months' time. By the way, while I keep on drinking like this, I'm about to drink like this again.
Is so that you're not showing the corporate logo.
Exactly. I'm not slowing down like Trump drinking with two hands. I actually, it is kind of like Shawshank Redemption when Morgan Freeman he leaves jail and he has to ask permission to pee because he's so conditioned.
Oh, that's right.
I,
Yes.
I am so conditioned from the ABC. I just cannot show a logo to anyone at any point in time. Anyway, let's move on. Do you want to say anything else about COVID before we move on?
No.
No, okay, let's move on to race type stuff. Mm-hmm. The obligatory culture war section at the beginning. Do you want to say anything about any of those things? Statues or any of that kind of stuff?
Bring them all down.
That's it. The only thing I want to say about statues is
Yes.
my favorite statue moment wasn't about statues. It was about Trump tweeting. It was when I think this
This
is
is the
about
thing.
statues.
The statue is never about the statue.
No, well, this time for me is purely about the 3 words in a tweet. I think this is about statues. You'll see what I mean when I read it out to you. Mm-hmm. You can't be sure.
Yeah.
Just out of nowhere, the lone warrior in caps.
Oh, yeah, I saw this.
What?
What did that mean?
I think Trump was describing himself as the lone warrior fighting for statues.
Right.
That's what I think. But I mean, you can't
Fighting
be sure.
for those statues who can't fight for themselves because they can't move.
Yeah, I'm guessing that. I mean, I assume he's talking about himself. I love that he's comparing himself to a warrior when he
That
dodged
is-
the draft.
that is- yeah,
and
I
he's
did-
the only warrior. The troops aren't warriors. He is the
I
warrior.
did see that. I only saw this tweet after everyone had, memed their own versions
Yes,
of
yes.
it. I don't actually follow Trump on Twitter because you don't need to follow Trump on
No, you don't.
on Twitter.
Especially-
You're going to see every one of his tweets anyway. So, yeah, but no, I was I was puzzled by that one.
Yeah, I love that. But what I want to actually talk about is army bases, the Confederate.
Yes.
And the reason why I talk about that is because we haven't talked about that much generally. And when I say we, I mean society. Like they've been talking about statues, they've been talking about TV shows.
Yes.
The army base is named after Confederate soldiers or Confederate generals. Doesn't get talked about quite so much, but it's actually, in my opinion, the toughest question for Republicans. And I'll tell you why. I think they're in a jam on this one. Okay, so let me tell you the history of this briefly, because it's not well known. Elizabeth Warren filed an amendment in the Senate Armed Services Committee, like immediately, like the moment George Floyd died, she had this amendment. It was just as soon as the controversy hit, immediately, as soon as the protest, she was in there. And I think that was very clever. And the reason why it was very clever was because, and what her amendment is, this is an amendment, by the way, to the Defense Funding Act. Okay.
Yes.
So this is a serious amendment. If they pass this amendment, you cannot get defense funding without this particular.
No, yeah, this is not one of those joke amendments.
Yeah, so
this is not an amendment she heard on PEP.
No. This is a real deal. This one here.
Yeah.
And what this amendment said was to establish a 3-year commission to rename bases and all military assets, like ships or whatever, so they're not named after Confederate soldiers. And the thing is, she got in so fast, so early when passion was so high. The Republicans passed it on a voice vote.
Yeah.
Like that's a big vote. Like they didn't even bother to take a show of hands because there were that many people, right? So it went straight through. Now, I want to tell you the significance of that. The significance of that is then attached to the bill that goes to the floor.
Yes.
It has to be voted for on the floor. They cannot bury it anymore.
No, they can't.
What that means is you're going to have a situation when that hits the floor where people's names are attached to votes on this question. People who are running for re-election. Let me tell you why this is. You're starting to get the flavor for it, but it gets worse for the Republicans because, of course, Trump then jumps in and he tweets out, seriously failed presidential candidate Senator Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren just introduced an amendment on the renaming of many of our legendary military bases from which we trained to win 2 world wars. Hopefully our great Republican senators won't fall for this.
Because, if you rename them, it actually reverses the result of the 2 world wars.
I would have thought that most people weren't happy with the status quo of the two world wars. Most people don't go, you know what? I loved what happened in World War I and II. Let's keep that going. But the Trump saw as a positive. Anyway, the fact he dropped the word Pocahontas, that right there, that says this is going to be a culture war issue.
Yes.
You cannot escape this anymore.
Yeah.
This is going to be a culture war issue. So that's culture war activation level 3, right there. Anyway, so he then that's making it tough for Republicans now because there's going to be a vote.
Yes.
And on one hand, if they vote for it, the amendment,
Yes.
or for the defense spending bill,
Yeah.
if they vote for it, then they are going to get Trump tweeting at them in the middle of an election campaign, which is what they really don't want. And they'll get his base turning against them in the middle of an election campaign, which they really can't afford. On the other hand, if they go with Trump, this is a very hard vote to defend.
It's impossible to defend
Yes.
on any grounds other than political expediency, which is looking pretty fucking weak.
And by the way, remember these guys, the battleground in this election is totally about the suburbs.
Yes.
It's about the people who really don't like this shit.
Yes.
So,
but I mean, let's just take a step back and say, okay, so the United States military has all these bases named after generals who fought against the United States military in order to preserve the great cause of slavery.
Yes.
Why don't we just name the bases after, Admiral von Ludendorff or the Erwin Rommel tank facility?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a fair point.
Like,
Mitch McConnell put up no argument at all. He was like, I can only speak for myself on this issue. If it's appropriate to take another look at these names, I'm okay with that.
I've been photographed in front of one too many Confederate flags in my time, and I can tell you.
Whatever.
It ain't good. I mean, and this coming in the week, by the way, speaking of Confederate flags, that Mississippi removed the Confederate battle flag from their state flag.
Yep.
That happened with, it was unanimous Democratic support, and I think also a majority of Republicans in the state house. Now, that, to be fair, was not an issue that Trump had weighed in on, so that gave people more political wiggle room. Also, it's at the state level. But this is the way that the wind is blowing, people.
It gets worse because then Josh Hawley, who is running for president in 2024 as a social conservative, as Mr. Social Conservative, he is like a Superman with a cape that says SC rather than S.
Yeah.
He then, of course, got up in the Senate and tried to bluster a bit to win some viral cred amongst his future voters.
Holy viral cred.
But the purpose was to erase from history, erase every person and name and event not righteous enough, and to cast those who would object as defenders of the cause of slavery, to reenact in our current politics that civil war that tore brother from brother and divided this nation against itself. You think the way some in the media talk about this country, that they're sad we're still not fighting the Civil War. They would like us to fight a new civil war in our culture, day and night, without end.
Dr. Dave, this move is about reenacting the Civil War.
First of all, Civil War reenactment is already a thing.
That is true.
Which has a very distinctive and weird subculture. Tony Horowitz's book Confederates in the Attic is the definitive book about that.
Are we reading that?
Put it on the reading list.
Okay.
By the way, I also want you to add Indrani's fantastic recommendation, Gus Anhaj's White Nation, which it's about Australia rather than the US, but one of the most important books ever.
Gus
Anhaj. Well, we can discuss the spelling afterwards. That's okay.
What was the other one? It was Toys in the Attic, was it?
Confederates in the Attic.
Confederates in the Attic.
Tony, so
That's an album.
speaking of Confederate, Civil War reenactment. The second thing is that, okay, as we've discussed on this show before, the Union won the Civil War and then Confederates spent decades undoing the victory. By politics.
Yeah.
And all of those Confederate statues that are up and military bases named after Confederates, that was the political victory that, the many political victories that were won by the South for many years, for many decades afterwards. So yes, we are actually still fighting that war.
Apparently. But here's where it gets in. It keeps on getting worse and worse. Here's where it gets
Yes.
worse. Then a whole bunch of polling comes out after this, after Josh Hawley gets up. And you'll never believe it, but this army base thing
Yeah.
is actually unpopular.
Oh,
31% of independents support renaming army bases. 41% are against it. This is Morning Consult. 33 to 48 overall. All right. Amongst Republicans, 13% support it, 76% against it. Quinnipiac, 44-47 overall. Independents, 44 support it, 49 don't. Republicans, 9% support it, 86% support. So now this is even worse for Republicans in this situation because they're even dealing with with something which is hard to defend, but at the same time, for some inexplicable reason, popular. So at least it's a split vote, which is the worst scenario for someone who's running for re-election.
Thing is, what can save them is the fact it's low salience.
Well, you'd think that. But then, okay, it becomes high salience when, well, first of all, Hawley at this point in time, obviously Mitch McConnell talked to him because he tried to reel it back a little bit. And he proposed a decoy amendment, which is essentially an amendment that looks identical.
Yes, yeah.
But does nothing, which is to establish a commission, just like Elizabeth Warren's commission. But rather than renaming these bases, what it will do, it will assess whether any name, symbol, or other relic actually valorizes the Confederacy. It will create criteria to assess whether the dominant meaning has changed since first becoming associated with the Department of Defense. It will hold public hearings with local and state stakeholders to solicit their input, and it will deliver a congressional report by October 1st, 2022. So it will do absolutely nothing. But then you think to yourself, okay, the decoy might work. This might work for them. Trump tweets again
Of course he
this
does.
week. I will veto the Defense Authorization Bill if the Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren, of all people, amendment, which will lead to the renaming plus other bad things of Fort Bragg, Fort Robert E. Lee, and many other military bases from which we won 2 world wars, is in the bill. So now Trump has said he is going to veto the defense funding bill if they do this.
Amazing.
So now it has huge salience because it's going to become a massive shit fight. And this is the worst. And the Democrats are loving this. This is just all gravy for them because they aren't split at all. They're all on the same side with their supporters. Republicans are split in 12 different ways.
Yes.
And this is entirely because Trump's swinging his dick for reasons I do not understand.
What else can you say?
Okay. All right. Before we move off race, I would like you to talk about fair housing regulations because someone had online who I couldn't get their name asked us to talk about it, and I'm not across this story. So, but you are apparently.
So yes, this is just something that was being tweeted about today, I think. I don't know if he's been talking about it beforehand, but yes, there was just this as far as I saw it, there was just this tweet that basically came out of the blue where Trump said that what's the acronym I'm looking for? It's affirmatively furthering fair housing rule. Okay, so it's a 2015 Obama rule, AFFH, that is designed, it recognizes that there is still de facto segregation in American suburbs. There's segregation by race. There's segregation by socioeconomic status. It is designed to deal with that. And I mean, it's not a particularly rigorous rule that's in place. It basically requires municipalities to collect certain amounts of data as a condition of getting certain things from the government. It doesn't really have many mechanisms to actually correct segregation. I mean, I think what it basically has is when new developments are built, there will have to be some sort of aspirational measure in place to try to stop segregation. But it's really a data collecting exercise. But nonetheless, Trump signals in this tweet that he says this is destroying once vibrant suburbs.
Is it destroying once vibrant suburbs?
It's never even been enforced.
Okay.
You know why? Because Ben Carson has been in charge of the HUD since 2016, and he has basically delayed the enforcement of this for years. So this, once again, is pure culture war, right? This is that black president. He put these rules in place to try to change your neighborhood. And he's destroying your neighborhood through this rule that's never been enforced.
Right, I see.
And so, okay, we don't know how far he's going to go with this. He's basically threatened to destroy this. It hasn't gone, hasn't gone any further than that. But that just gives you an idea of where the strategy is heading at the moment, right? I will veto defense spending that destroys conservative names for military bases. I will get rid of rules that are designed to prevent housing segregation in suburbs. We can really see where this is going.
Yeah, there was actually a story this week which at the time I was a bit confused by. I'll tell you very briefly about the story because it's going somewhere rather than the story itself, but it sets it up. It was a Daily Beast article about Van Jones.
Right.
And the idea was Van Jones is this black commentator on CNN who's very into criminal justice reform, and he works with Jared Kushner to push through the First Step Act.
Oh yes, yeah.
He was, and he copped a lot of grief for that.
Yes,
but he said, you know what? I don't care who's passing this stuff. I agree, it's weak tea. It's better than it was. We're freeing some people. Some people is better than no people. He's one of those kind of pragmatic type political activists. Fair enough. Anyway. A leak came out that was in the Daily Beast that Van Jones had been secretly working with Trump on his executive order.
Oh, yes.
The other day.
Yes.
The police reform executive, which wasn't doing much, but there wasn't much that Trump could do. Anyway, but the thing, now that itself isn't a big deal. He worked with Trump before, right? The big deal is this, that he then twice went on CNN to praise it without disclosing that he had allegedly worked on it.
Yeah.
What he said was, I got some quotes here. He said, "We are winning. Donald Trump had no plan a month ago to work on this issue at all. The fact that we're now in the direction of moving forward, I think is good." And then he also said, "As hard as we worked in the Obama years, we never got law enforcement to come to the table and stay there. The idea that law enforcement's standing behind Trump on stuff that we've been asking for decades, I think is progress." Okay. So obviously that is very bad. If that's true, that's very bad. He's there complimenting Trump on this executive order when he worked on it. He doesn't disclose that he worked on it.
Yeah.
Now, he completely denies this story.
Yeah.
He says, quote, "The article is based on false sensational charges, apparently designed to get clicks, shares, and likes. I haven't even visited DC since before the pandemic started, let alone been inside the White House. I've never been included in any meetings about police reform, not by phone, Zoom, nada. I didn't know what was in the EO until the day it was released." I have to admit, when I read that, I'm seeing lots of holes in that denial. I'm saying, he didn't say he never worked on it.
No.
He didn't say, again, he's saying that he didn't went in meetings.
Yeah.
But, he didn't say he didn't talk to someone.
Yeah.
Anyway, but whatever. Whether it's true or not, there's no way we can really know. But the reason I brought this up was because when I read that story, I thought, who's leaking on Van Jones? Van Jones is Donald Trump's lifesaver here.
Yeah.
Van Jones is his connection to the black people he's trying to reach in this election. He's one of the few non-Pentecostal black figures in the Trump orbit. So why is the White House, because that leak has to come from the White House, why is the White House trying to destroy him for helping them? That is insane behavior. So what, because that's the first thing I think of in leaks. I think, why is this being leaked? And so I was looking at that, I was going, this doesn't make any sense. That they're punishing him for helping them. And then an article came out and it started to make some sense to me. And it relates to what you were just saying, which is this article from Axios. I talked about it on the show today about Jared Kushner and about Trump and Jared Kushner and how I'll read you just a quote from the article. "President Trump has told people in recent days that he regrets following some of his son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner's political advice, including supporting criminal justice reform, and will stick closer to his own instincts. 3 people with direct knowledge of the president's thinking tell Axios. Behind the scenes, one person who spoke with the president interpreted his thinking this way: no more of Jared's woke shit. Another said..."
Whoa, Jared's woke
he's so woke. "Another said Trump has indicated that following Kushner's advice has harmed him politically. The sources said the president is resolved to stick to his instincts and jettison any policies that go against them, including ambitious police reform. So there is the answer to your question, where we're going.
Yes.
Where we're going is he's giving up, if this is true, we're going is he's giving up on the black vote entirely.
No
and
more
he's
woke shit.
doubling down on the base.
Yeah, no, that does seem to be where it's
and that's
going.
why, and the person who burnt Van Jones was obviously of the opinion he should do this and wanted to make sure that Trump doesn't go back on it.
Yeah.
By destroying Van Jones any chance he has of working with Trump in the future.
Van Jones, by the way, someone who strikes me as his heart's in the right place, but God, he's a loose cannon. Like, Google Van Jones 9/11.
Oh wow. Okay. That's homework.
Yeah. You going to do that now?
No, I'm making note because the hand of God is not here at the moment, so I have to make the notes. Okay.
What are we talking about now?
Okay, what we're talking about now is, before we move off race, I wanted to do one obligatory thing, which I've been wanting to do for ages. You're going to love this.
Yeah.
I want to defend Rand Paul.
Okay.
You can have a right rebuttal. I actually don't think you're going to rebut this. This is a reasonable defense. I'm not defend everything he's ever done. I want to defend Rand Paul's resistance to an anti-lynching bill, because he's the only person who is stopping an anti-lynching bill at the moment. He's copying a lot of, Rand Paul loves lynching. Why is Rand Paul stopping an anti-lynching bill? Well, this should have been passed 100 years ago, etc. Okay. The reason why Rand Paul, I was curious. I looked up why Rand Paul was resisting the anti-lynching bill. The reason he's resisting the anti-lynching bill, he says, is because he says that it's, first of all, unnecessary, because everything that would happen with anti-lynching is already illegal. Mm-hmm. And secondly, and this is more important for him, is that it's incredibly vague what is covered by, inverted commas, lynching.
Right.
Let me read you his quote. If the national conscience requires a federal law to express its symbolic support for laws that already outlaw lynching, I will not stand in the way. As long as the new law of conspiracy clearly defines lynching as murder or attempted murder, or at the very least serious bodily harm or an attempt at serious bodily harm, I do not want anyone, black, white or brown, to be given 10 years in prison for slapping someone or painting graffiti on the church. And apparently, graffiti is covered.
Is lynching. Well, we did talk about... We did talk about, remember, a few weeks ago, these state-level anti-lynching laws like South Carolina, where, the key thing isn't that someone gets killed or even hurt. The key thing that makes it a lynching is that it's more than one person against one person.
Yeah, and so I'm going to defend him on that. I think that's a reasonable point of view, and I don't think he should be vilified. I mean, you can vote against him, you can disagree with him, but I don't think he should be vilified for taking that stance. Do you agree or disagree?
I make it a policy in life to think about Rand Paul as little as possible.
Fair enough.
And I'm not going to stop that.
That's
now.
okay. That's okay. And the other reason I want to defend Rand Paul as well, because he introduced an act which
There's
I like.
another reason?
There is. He introduced the FAIR Act. And what the FAIR Act is a civil asset forfeiture act. And this is one of his hobby horses,
Yes,
and one of mine as well.
Yeah.
Civil asset forfeiture, for those who don't know, is when the police arrest you. Sorry, they have to arrest you. No. When the police turn up at your place, and they feel they have reason to believe that you may have gained some assets as a result of a crime. They then take those assets and they keep them for themselves. Yeah. So if you're an underfunded police department, you should just go around and just take whatever shit you want. The standard of evidence is not a criminal standard of evidence. The standard of evidence is preponderance of the evidence, which is very easy to prove.
Yes.
And that's evidenced by the fact that they constantly... And are you going to go to court to try and get back your $300 TV or whatever? No, of course you're not. You're going to spend 5 years in court to get that back. Yeah. So they get away with it over and over again. Lots of states have banned it. Mm-hmm. And what they do, the police, is they work with the feds. There's something called equitable sharing, where they work with the feds to seize people's assets instead of the state,
right?
Instead under the state laws,
yes,
and then they get to keep it as well. So they just work around the state. Now, what this FAIR Act does is it gets rid of equitable sharing. If a state bans civil asset forfeiture, it's banned, full stop, inside the state. The other thing is it increases the evidentiary threshold from preponderance of evidence to clear and convincing evidence, which is the least they should do. It also gives people a free lawyer if they want to fight it, which is a big thing if you're going to be in court for the next 5 years. And this is the best one of all. All funds from civil asset forfeiture from the moment that's passed, go to the Treasury, not to the police.
Right.
So there's no more incentive for police to go around just taking shit and then bringing it home.
Yeah.
So that is a great bill.
Fair enough. Great. Let's stop talking about it.
Let's stop talking. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to 2020. Actually, we'll go 2020. Let's go 2020. I want to talk. Let's. I'm going to skip all this. Okay, I'm going to skip a few things. I want to talk about the primaries and and I'm going to start with. And this is going to lead to something you want to talk about.
Yes.
I want to start with some stats that I wanted to bring on the show today, but I couldn't fit it in. So I'm going to bring it on now, and I'll probably bring it on the show on TV when we come back from our break. The percentage of primaries in which an inexperienced candidate defeated one or more experienced candidates. Okay, so these is inexperienced people defeating experienced people.
Yep.
It's an interesting graph. It's a graph. I'm not going to describe the whole graph, but basically Republicans and Democrats are pretty much aligned. 2014, 31% Republicans, inexperienced candidates defeating experienced candidates, 29% of Democrats. 2016, 56% of Republicans to 34% of Democrats. All of a sudden, there are all these inexperienced candidates who came up with Trump. When President Trump took office, this is a quote from this is a tweet from David Wasserman. Took office in January 2017, there were 241 Republicans in the House. Since then, 115 of those 241 Republicans have either retired, resigned, been defeated, or are retiring in 2020.
Wow.
48% from 3 years ago.
That is massive.
At this stage with Obama, bear in mind, Obama had an almighty shellacking in 2010. At this stage for Obama, it was 44%, and that was after redistricting, when a lot of people retire. No redistricting here, and it's 4% more. What this means is that for whatever reason, this populist moment, experienced people are on the nose in the Republican Party. And being inexperienced and being authentic and all the rest of it, it gets you elected in the primary. And it leads to a whole bunch of very interesting people winning primaries. Dr. Dave.
Absolutely. We are looking at the very exciting prospect of a QAnon caucus. Now, we have talked before on this show about QAnon and what it is. And the core of this is the idea that Trump is secretly working to have all of these enemies arrested.
For pedophilia.
Yeah, the Clintons and Obama, having all of them arrested for pedophilia and various heinous crimes. The sort of dominant strand of this says that Trump was actually working with Mueller, that the whole Mueller thing was actually a decoy. And so there are a lot of people out there who believe, based on the enigmatic writings of Q on started off on 8chan, I'm not sure where the primary Q venue is now, that that mass arrests are just around the corner, and it's going to happen now.
They've been just around the corner for 3 years.
They have been just around the corner for 3 years, and there are. I mean, this is like any religion that keeps having prophecies that keep failing. There are always people dropping out, but then there are always new people joining as well, and people who stay on. Even when prophecy fails, they're the ones who become most tightly bonded to it because they've got the most invested, not just emotionally. I mean, these are people who have basically sacrificed relationships with their families. They've possibly lost their jobs over this. They've spent a huge amount of money keeping this going. They have to believe that something is going to happen. And as we know from one of the books that is already on Dr. Dave's reading list, When Prophecy Fails by Raymond Festinger, basically what people do is reconcile their beliefs with events as they are happening. But there are now 9 people who have indicated support for QAnon who have won primaries. 5 of them are from California because of California's jungle primary system, where the primary just happens between everybody who is in the field from whatever party. And so a lot of them come from areas that weren't that contested. If they were in the top 2, then under California law, that means they're on the ballot in November. So there are 5 of them. One of the most notable others was Lauren Bobbitt from Colorado. She was notable because primaried a long-standing Republican who had Trump's support. She, though, interestingly, seemed to indicate today or yesterday that she doesn't support QAnon anymore. So she might be interested enough in actually winning that she's not going in for this.
The quote they're basing that on is that they saying that she's supporting Q was she said, "No, honestly, everything that I've heard of Q, I hope that this is real because it only means that America is getting stronger and better and people are returning to conservative values. And that's what I am for. And so everything that I have heard about this movement is only motivating, encouraging and bringing people together stronger. And if that and if this is real, then it can be really great for our country." I don't actually take that as a ringing endorsement.
No.
So I think that's probably fair enough.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you look at it, sorry to jump in, I was just saying, if you look at her, at the way she's marketed herself, she runs an open carry restaurant. Like she's a guns person, right? She's really into guns. She's the person who travelled across state to confront Beto O'Rourke about guns.
Yes, yeah.
And if you look at all her literature, all her photos, honestly, you look up her name right now on Google, every photo has a gun. Every photo does not have a pedophile. It has a gun. So I think guns are her thing.
Sentence you weren't expecting to hear today.
Anyway, go on.
Yeah. But there are some of these people are going to win. They're in safe Republican
There's
districts.
one of them who definitely will.
Yeah. So Oregon, Ohio, Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia.
People are going to win. So there is the possibility that there will be this small Q caucus, right? And by the way, Media Matters identified there are still 51 Q supporters running in primaries that haven't happened yet. So there could be more joining them. But there is the prospect that a few of them could win and then could be taking office right at the moment when QAnon faces the most severe test of its prophecy possible, which is actually that Trump loses.
Yes.
And the arrests never happen. Which, I mean, that would be a lot worse than any of the other failed prophecies that have happened so far. Because you'd have to think that's pretty fundamental to the belief system that Trump isn't just going to lose and leave office without enacting the plan. Now, of course, some will say, okay, well, there's an even deeper plan
Yes, there always is.
here than what we're aware of. The plan actually did involve Trump losing, lulling them into an even more false sense of security. But it is going to be harder to maintain. So it could be very interesting times.
All I would say about the QAnon caucus is that you got to remember, I saw a lot of this with the Tea Party. It is in both sides' interest to hype this up.
Yes.
It is in the interest of the QAnon caucus to hype up, everyone's into Q, to build up their movement. And it's the interest of the people who don't like Q to hype it up, to say, hey, how crazy are these people?
Yeah.
So it's like when the Tea Party happened in 2010, everyone was a member of the Tea Party because they made it huge, this Tea Party thing, because it was in the interest of everyone to pretend it was this massive Tea Party movement. But in reality, half those Tea Party people now, you wouldn't at all think they had anything to do with the Tea Party.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be an element of this with the QAnon caucus as well, that 5 seconds after they become politicians, they'll be like any other politician. Yeah. We'll see about that. It is interesting to watch nevertheless. I want to tell you my favourite poll of the week.
What is that?
And then you can respond with your
I've got a
favourite poll
few
of the week.
too,
Yeah.
yes.
My favourite poll of the week is from USA Today Suffolk. And they asked people who has the right experience to be president.
The right experience.
Joe Biden got 67% of people saying he has the right experience to be president. Donald Trump got 37%. The person who has been president for the last 3 years got 37% of people saying he has the right experience to be president. I found that so funny. Anyway,
So much winning.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to continue the theme from last week. In fact, I'm going to continue doing this every week that we keep seeing these very large leads for Biden. I'm going to keep looking for, okay, what might be some signs that maybe that lead is not as strong as it looks. And Natalie Jackson from PRRI, who I mentioned last week, and I highly recommend you follow if you're into poll skepticism. She has really just been tearing her hair out about this, saying these polls are going to basically depress the vote because everyone just assumes that, Biden's going to win by a large margin. I kind of think the experience of 2016 will mitigate those depressive, but I think she's got a point. Okay, so first of all, there was a poll out of Wisconsin, which John Barron retweeted, right? Caught his attention.
Yes.
It's the Trafalgar Group poll that showed Trump up by 1.
They're a Republican group, aren't they?
They are a Republican group, and this is a massive outlier. Why should we care about this?
Yes.
Because in 2016, Trafalgar was the most accurate pollster in Wisconsin and Michigan, using very unorthodox methods, right? Trafalgar decided that other polls weren't actually getting a representation of Trump supporters. So rather than just asking people who they're planning to vote for, they asked them who did their neighbours plan to vote for.
That's a good one.
And they thought that actually gave them a more accurate picture
It's interesting.
of what was going on. And in those two races, it actually did. So much so that APOR, the American Association for Public Opinion Research, actually really seriously looked at this as an alternative polling methodology. And there have been other polls that have been doing it. So this is all a way of saying Trafalgar, despite the fact that it's a Republican operated poll and it has a distinctive political purpose and it is an outlier, that just can't be dismissed lightly. Having said that, though, yes, they were very accurate in 2016, way off in 2018.
Which was exactly the same as Rasmussen.
Yeah. And in fact, currently are sitting on I think it's either C or C minus poll rating.
The 538.
So yeah. As I said, there aren't that many gaps in the armor at this point. But so I'm looking for I'm looking for whatever I can find.
By the way, just to pick up on what you're saying about depressing the vote, I don't remember. This is off the top of my head. I don't remember what the name of the polling outfit was, but I remember reading about 2 weeks ago about a poll from 2016.
Yeah.
Where the turnout of people who said that they thought the election was going to be a comfortable win was 3% lower than the people who said they thought it was going to be close.
Right.
And so that is an example of what Natalie's talking about depressing the vote if you think it's going to be a doddle.
Yes.
So just throw that out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, there was another poll to give Trump supporters heart this week out of Arizona.
Yep.
That showed Trump up by 5 over Biden and also showed Martha McSally leading.
Well, it's because of that trip vote,
Now,
the trip act.
Yes.
They love it.
Unfortunately, this poll was conducted by Gravis in conjunction with the One America News Network.
Okay. All right.
Which, you can actually just throw that one out. I mean,
so
Real
that's
Clear
a-
Politics will put it into its polling average.
Yeah. That's a 20-point lead for Biden.
That's just shit. Yeah.
By the way, if I can be a real dime store Nate Silver here, I am actually like I don't know what's going to happen in the election, but if it's really close, I personally expect Arizona to be the swing state, not Wisconsin. If it comes down to if it comes down to one state,
Yes.
I think that Michigan and Pennsylvania are going to go to Biden.
Yep.
But I think that Arizona will be 1 or 2% more blue than Wisconsin this
Right.
year. But
Yes.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yep.
Anyway, just throw that out there.
And just finally, when you look at all the averages, this was actually not a week where Biden's lead expanded. It basically stayed in place.
Yeah, and it's going to revert to mean at some point in time.
Yes,
The
yeah.
mean is not 14-point lead.
It's
It's a 6-point lead or a 7-point lead.
Yes, yeah. So I think that on 538's averages, Trump's favorability rose from 40.4% to 40.5%.
I think that's going to be very encouraging to Republicans.
Yes,
Dr. Dave.
and
Nice
the
try.
Economist's forecasting model. So the Economist is the first one out there that's actually doing the let's put a probability on this model, which is
That's so dumb.
very, well, I was going to say brave. So their forecast of a Biden victory dropped from 89.2% to 88.9%.
There you go.
By the way, that sort of that 11% for Trump, that is almost entirely a scenario where he wins the Electoral College and loses the popular vote, which I do see as I do see it as highly unlikely at this point that Trump will win the popular vote.
Yeah, I think most people
But
do.
the Electoral College. So at this point, things are looking pretty good for Biden.
Yeah.
But I will keep looking for any possible weakness.
God bless you, Dr. Dave. The only other thing I'd say about 2020 on our way to the Supreme Court is that there was one vote which was interesting, and you'll see why it's on the way to the Supreme Court, and it was that Oklahoma vote for Medicaid expansion.
Yes, that was very significant.
Very, very close vote, 50.5% to 49.5% in favour. With the passage of this law, not only does it then allow 200,000 more Oklahomans to get covered by Medicaid because it basically means that the federal government subsidizes 9-1 the state government to bump up Medicaid, which is healthcare for the poor, from whatever it is in Oklahoma is probably, I guess, 75%, 50% of the poverty line, something like that, up to 133% of the poverty line is now covered by Medicaid because of that vote. And that means that 13 states now have not expanded Medicaid. But a majority of Republican senators are now representing Medicaid expanding states after the Supreme Court told them they had the choice, and it took them a long time, but now they've made the choice. Obamacare, Dr. Dave, in the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about it? Do you want me to talk about it? Do you want to talk about last week?
You can take this one.
Okay, I'll take this one. Essentially, Obamacare is being taken to the Supreme Court by the states, by the red states, the very states I just referred to.
Yes.
And their logic is tortured. Their logic is this. Their logic is that when Obamacare was passed in 2009 and in 2010, they thought it was very, very important that they had the individual mandate. The individual mandate makes it compulsory for you to buy health insurance. The idea at the time was, if it's not compulsory to buy health insurance, then people just won't buy health insurance until they get sick. And so no one will buy health insurance, and then they'll buy it at a subsidized rate just when they get sick, and then they'll go off it again, because everyone had to be covered under Obamacare. So,
Yes.
so
And also, I mean, it's important as well to have the pool, the insurance pool. The bigger it is, the more able you actually are to protect everyone.
Exactly. And so if people picked and chose when they bought health insurance, there would be a very small pool and would make private health insurance go bankrupt, essentially.
Yes.
And so at the time, they said it was very, very important. It was critical to have this mandate making it compulsory to buy private health insurance, or you got fined.
Yes.
Okay. Then in 2017, Donald Trump, while trying to repeal Obamacare, they found they didn't have the votes to do it because people were scared that they would then lose an election, which they would have for sure. And so what they did instead was they didn't repeal Obamacare. All they did was when they passed their tax bill, they made part of the tax bill, because the fine for not purchasing health insurance was decreed a tax by the Supreme Court back in 2012. That was how they saved Obamacare. I don't want to go into too much detail there. It gets confusing. But under the tax bill in 2017, they declared the fine for not getting health insurance is $0.
That's right. Yes.
And so now the argument being used now,
God, this is special.
And it hasn't unwound Obamacare. Obamacare is still fine. It's crap, but it's still fine. But the argument they're using in court now is this. I thought you said back in 2010 that the mandate was critical for Obamacare. The mandate is now $0. And so since the mandate is now $0, but it's critical, then that means that Obamacare, by the way, sorry. I left one thing. The only reason it was constitutional was because of that mandate, because they said it was a tax. Right? Remember I said back in 2012 that the Supreme Court declared that mandate a tax? That was the only reason it was constitutional. They said once the tax became $0, that means it's unconstitutional. Because the only reason it was constitutional was because of that tax, and that tax is now $0. So therefore, you can't get rid of that tax element. It's impossible to see how that. I know they tried to get rid of it in 2017. They thought they were getting rid of it, but getting rid of it actually, under the logic of 2010, makes the whole thing not work. So therefore, we must get rid of all of Obamacare. That's their argument.
Oh, that is just some debating bullshit.
It is just some debating bullshit, right? Because obviously in the real world, it's still working.
Yeah.
Despite what people said in 2010. And in 2017, they knew it would work because they passed a bill to zero it out, not thinking it would then fall apart. So obviously Congress intended for it to work as it has. Anyway, so there's a stupid logic. Also, there's a standing issue. At the Supreme Court, you need to have the case affect you in some way. You need to be damaged in order to prosecute this case. What is the damage of you having this of Obamacare if you don't have to get health insurance?
Yeah.
And it costs $0. This is what they argue. They argue that when you look at what Congress said in 2009 and 2010, everyone agreed that the ACA, my fault. when you look at 2009 and 2010, the language said that they shall carry insurance. People shall carry insurance. And therefore they're injured by a law that commands them to do something that they don't want to do, even though the fine is $0. So it's stupid. The whole thing is stupid.
Absolutely.
Everyone who's
Ridiculous.
anyone when it comes to law laughs at this lawsuit, but it's still happening and it's gone to the Supreme Court. And the fact that the Supreme Court is now hearing it now, but they're not going to rule on it until after the election, is getting people worried.
Yes.
Because they think that John Roberts is a political creature.
Mm-hmm.
And if he was releasing his verdict before the election,
Yes.
he would want to save it. But after the election,
Ooh.
who knows?
Yes.
Do you have anything to say about
No,
this?
I don't.
It's terrible.
It is awful.
Okay, let's just go through quickly a couple of this week's stuff. I'm saving the religious stuff for you because I know that's your area.
Well, I'm going to have to go in about 3 minutes.
Oh, Jesus.
That's okay. We can do it next week.
That's okay. All right, okay. All right. I will. Oh, what can I get in here? All right. I'll tell you what I'll get in here.
What?
I'll get in here is we're gonna talk. We've got the whole holidays to talk about stuff here, Dr. Dave.
Yeah.
so we'll pick up the rest of the Supreme Court next time we talk. I want to just now, just clear up. I want to answer the question I asked last podcast.
Okay,
That I
yes.
said I was going to ask you
What's that?
about a poll which I saw from YouGov,
Yes.
where they said that 31% of they asked the question, do you feel that black and white people are treated equally in your community?
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I'm just getting the exact numbers here. 41% of white people said yes. 36% of white people said no. 66% of black people said yes, and 12% of black people said no. And I found that strange. I found that impossible to explain. That seemed completely contrary to all my assumptions. And I was going to ask you to try and explain how that could possibly be the case. That more black people felt black and white people were being treated equally by the police in their local community than white people. And so this made no sense to me. I was trying to nut this out. And so I went back and I sent out some emails to YouGov to say,
Yeah.
what is going on here?
Right.
I looked at their polls,
Yes.
the question order,
Yep.
the number. I found out what was going on.
What?
And this is a lesson for people in future with YouGov.
Yeah.
They got their own numbers wrong.
Really?
It wasn't 66% saying yes. It was 12% saying yes.
What? That's what? So did they just reverse the
They
numbers?
reversed the numbers. It was 12-66, not 66-12.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna put in the comments. I'm gonna put the picture up just to prove that I'm not making up this bullshit. I'm gonna put up their graph that they have in their article, and I'm gonna put up their crosstabs and
Yes.
show you that they fucked up their own poll in their report.
That's depressing.
So. And that's the second time. The reason I'm saying this thing for the future,
Yeah.
that's the second time I've seen YouGov screw up their own report. They screwed it up in a different way the last time. But if you are following YouGov and you see a result that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, go to the crosstabs and check it for yourself because they've probably screwed it up. Okay?
Well, on that note, see you next week, guys.
So, you guys, thank you very much for watching on YouTube and Facebook. And this has been